Please don't look at me. They cut my hair. The fat girl begged the billionaire, her voice shaking in the middle of a crowded community center. She wasn't just hiding her head. She was hiding years of shame, pain, and heartbreak. But when the billionaire put down the scissors and said, "No one's judging you here," something inside her cracked open. She came for a free haircut. She never expected a man like him, a man who could have anyone, to see beauty in her brokenness. But the moment he touched her scarred scalp, their worlds began to change. What happens when a billionaire known for saving others meets a woman who's forgotten how to save herself? When her past resurfaces online to destroy everything, will she run again, or finally let herself be seen? Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't facing the world, it's believing you're still worthy of love when the world has already called you ugly. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The rain fell in a gentle mist over Atlanta, coating the city in shades of pewter and steel. Droplets collected on the hood of Shanice Rivers' oversized sweatshirt as she stood outside the New Light Community Center, her fingers nervously working the drawstrings. Each tug pulled the fabric tighter around her face, hiding what remained of her hair after Andre's cruel attack. 2 nights ago still felt like a nightmare. The memory of scissors snapping through her carefully maintained locks made her stomach clench. Andre's words cut deeper than the blades. "Now you'll be as ugly on the outside as you are inside. Nobody's gonna love you now." Shanice blinked back tears, watching other people hurry through the drizzle into the warmth of the community center. A banner over the door announced, "Free haircuts and job readiness services today." Her hand unconsciously moved to her roughly chopped hair again, feeling the uneven patches where Andre had hacked away at her dignity. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, though her legs felt weighted with lead. "Just get through the door." Inside, the community center hummed with activity. The front desk volunteer smiled warmly, handing Shanice a clipboard with forms to fill out. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely write her name. "First time here?" the volunteer asked kindly. Shanice nodded, keeping her head down. "Yes, ma'am." "Well, you're in for a treat today. We've got a special guest volunteer doing haircuts." From across the room, excited whispers filtered through the air. "Did you hear who's here? A celebrity, I heard. Someone important." The chatter only increased Shanice's anxiety. She found a seat in the waiting area, shrinking into herself as much as possible. The forms asked basic questions about employment status and career goals, but her mind kept drifting to Andre's face twisted with rage, to the sound of scissors closing, to the sight of her beautiful hair scattered across their apartment floor. Shanice Rivers. She startled at her name, looking up to see a tall black man in his early 30s, dressed casually in jeans and a plain grey t-shirt. Something about him seemed familiar, but her mind was too clouded with anxiety to place him. "I'm Cameron," he said softly. "Would you like to come with me?" Shanice rose on shaky legs, following him to one of the styling stations. Each step felt like walking through quicksand. When she caught sight of herself in the mirror, she quickly looked away. The fluorescent lights seemed to highlight every flaw, every jagged chunk of missing hair. Cameron gestured to the chair. "Make yourself comfortable." She perched on the edge like a frightened bird ready to take flight. When he reached for the cape to drape around her shoulders, she flinched hard enough to rock the chair. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't look at me. They cut my hair." The bustling room grew quiet, the weight of her pain filling the space. Shanice felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she couldn't stop them. 2 nights of holding everything inside had left her raw and fragile. Cameron set the scissors down with deliberate care. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, but firm. "No one's judging you here." She risked a glance up, meeting his eyes in the mirror. Where she expected to find pity or disgust, she saw only compassion. "What happened to you was wrong," he continued, "but it doesn't define you, and it doesn't determine your worth." Shanice's shoulders shook with silent sobs. The cape lay forgotten on the counter as Cameron pulled up a chair to sit beside her, careful to give her space. "I know you don't believe that right now," he said, "but I promise you, there's still beauty in you. Sometimes we need other people to help us see it again when we've forgotten how to look." His words touched something deep inside her, a tiny spark of hope she thought Andre had extinguished completely. She wanted to believe him, even though everything inside her screamed that she was damaged, unlovable, exactly what Andre had said. The room around them had resumed its normal activity, giving them a bubble of privacy in the midst of the busy space. Shanice gradually felt her breathing steady, though she kept her eyes fixed on her hands twisted in her lap. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted quietly. "We start right here," Cameron replied. "One small step at a time. Would you let me help you take the first one?" He reached for the scissors again, holding them where she could see them. This time, when she looked in the mirror, she forced herself to hold her own gaze for more than a second. The woman looking back at her was wounded, but not broken. Maybe, just maybe, Cameron was right about there still being beauty to find. But Shanice wasn't ready to believe it yet. The wounds were too fresh, Andre's words still echoing in her mind. She gave a tiny nod, granting permission she wasn't sure she felt, watching as Cameron picked up the cape once more. This time, when he draped it around her shoulders, she didn't flinch away. It was a small victory, but in that moment, it felt monumental, like the first step on a very long journey home to herself. The grey morning light filtered through the windows, softening the harsh fluorescence. In its gentle glow, Shanice sat very still, letting Cameron's quiet presence anchor her as she faced her reflection. She wasn't okay, not by a long shot. But for the first time since Andre's attack, she felt the tiniest flicker of hope that maybe someday she could be. The silence stretched between them, delicate as spun glass. Cameron cleared his throat softly. "Would you prefer if I turned the chair away from the mirror? Sometimes it's easier not to watch." Shanice's shoulders relaxed slightly at his understanding. "Yes, please," she whispered. With gentle hands, Cameron rotated the chair until she faced the wall instead of her reflection. The simple act of not having to look at herself made her breathing easier. She heard him gathering his tools, the quiet clink of scissors against the counter soothing in its normalcy. "I'm going to touch your hair now," he warned softly before making contact, "just to see what we're working with." His fingers moved carefully through what remained of her hair, assessing the damage. Shanice closed her eyes, trying to stay present instead of falling back into memories of that terrible night. Without meaning to, she began to hum, a habit that had always calmed her nerves. The melody was old and familiar, a gospel song her grandmother used to sing. Cameron's hands stilled suddenly. "Wait a minute," he said, voice filled with recognition. "That voice, I know that voice." He moved around to face her, eyes wide with realization. "You're the girl from the Grace Project video, the one who sang Amazing Grace for the hurricane victims." Shanice's humming cut off abruptly. Heat crept up her neck as memories flooded back, standing in front of a camera, pouring her heart into that song, watching in amazement as the video went viral and donations poured in. It felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to someone else entirely. "That was you, wasn't it?" Cameron pressed gently. She nodded, twisting her hands in her lap. "That was a long time ago," she murmured. 3 years, he said. My company partnered with the Grace Project. Your voice, it moved people, made them want to help. He paused, studying her face. Why did you stop singing? The question hit her like a physical blow. Shanice swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Life happened, she said finally. My church closed down after Pastor Williams got sick. And then... She trailed off, unable to say Andre's name. I just lost my voice, I guess, lost myself. Cameron resumed working on her hair, his movements precise and gentle. There's a community choir starting up here at the center, he said carefully. They meet on Thursday nights. Could use some experienced voices. No, Shanice said quickly, too quickly. I can't. I'm not ready for that. Okay. Cameron accepted easily, not pushing. He worked in silence for a few moments before speaking again. What about something smaller? We need someone at the reception desk part-time, just answering phones, greeting people, basic computer work. The pay isn't much, but... He trailed off, letting the offer hang in the air. Why? Shanice asked, confusion clear in her voice. Why would you want to help me? Because everyone deserves to be around good people, Cameron replied simply. Especially when they're rebuilding. His hands continued their careful work, evening out the ragged edges of her hair. No pressure, just think about it. Tears pricked at Shanice's eyes again, but these felt different from the earlier ones. These felt like relief, like possibility. Okay, she whispered. I'll think about it. They fell into comfortable silence as Cameron finished the haircut. When he was done, he didn't immediately turn her toward the mirror. Ready? He asked first, waiting for her nod before rotating the chair. Shanice kept her eyes closed for a long moment, gathering courage. When she finally looked, her breath caught. The cut was short. There hadn't been much choice about that, but it was neat, and even now, professional, intentional rather than violent. Thank you, she managed, voice thick with emotion. Cameron squeezed her shoulder gently. The job offer stands. Come by tomorrow morning if you're interested. Ask for me at the front desk. Later that night, in her tiny apartment, Shanice stood before her bathroom mirror. The harsh fluorescent light didn't hide anything. Not her puffy eyes, not the uneven patches where her hair was still growing back, not the extra weight she carried. But for the first time in days, she made herself really look. Maybe this is where healing starts, she whispered to her reflection, touching the neat edges of her new haircut. The words felt fragile in her mouth, but they also felt true. Sometimes the longest journeys began with the smallest steps. Her fingers drifted to her throat, where the ghost of a melody still lived. Not ready to sing yet, no. But maybe, just maybe, ready to try living again. Ready to be around good people, as Cameron had said. Ready to remember who she was before someone else's cruelty tried to define her. The woman in the mirror looked back at her, wounded but standing, scarred but surviving. Tomorrow, she decided, she would go back to the center. Tomorrow, she would take another small step forward. Tonight, she would let herself rest in the knowledge that even this much progress was worthy of celebration. The morning sun filtered through the community center's windows as Shanice approached the front desk, her heart pounding against her ribs. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a modest navy sweater and black slacks that she hoped would help her blend into the background. Her fingers kept drifting up to touch her short hair, still adjusting to the new length. The center was already bustling with activity. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere down the hall, and the smell of coffee wafted from the small kitchen area. Shanice stood uncertainly by the reception desk, unsure where to begin. You must be Shanice. A warm voice caught her attention. She turned to see an older black woman approaching, her silver hair styled in elegant twists, wearing a flowing purple dress that seemed to move with grace. "I'm Mother Eloise. Cameron told me you'd be joining us today." There was something immediately comforting about Mother Eloise's presence. At 62 years old, she carried herself with quiet dignity, but her eyes sparkled with kindness. "Yes, Ma'am," Shanice replied softly. "I'm supposed to start at the front desk today." Mother Eloise's smile deepened, creating a web of gentle wrinkles around her eyes. "Honey, first rule here. It's just Mother Eloise. No mom needed." She gestured for Shanice to follow her behind the desk. "I run the faith-based mentorship program here, but mostly I just try to keep everyone's spirits up. The Lord knows we all need a little lifting sometimes." As Mother Eloise showed her the basics, the phone system, the computer programs, the sign-in sheets, Shanice felt herself beginning to relax slightly. The older woman had a way of making everything seem manageable, breaking tasks down into simple steps. "Don't worry about getting everything perfect right away," Mother Eloise assured her. "We're all family here. We help each other grow." Throughout the morning, Shanice noticed something curious. Cameron Holt, the billionaire who'd given her this chance, moved through the center like a shadow. She spotted him sweeping the hallway near the classrooms, his jeans and plain t-shirt making him indistinguishable from any other volunteer. Later, she saw him balanced on a ladder, replacing fluorescent bulbs in the gymnasium. "He's always like that," Mother Eloise commented, catching Shanice's surprised look. "Says he can't expect others to serve if he won't do it himself. That man's got more money than the Lord's got angels, but you'd never know it by watching him work." Shanice found herself impressed, despite her lingering wariness. It was one thing to write checks from an office somewhere. It was another to get your hands dirty alongside everyone else. The morning passed quickly as Shanice learned her duties. She answered phones, directed visitors, and tried to memorize the various programs and services the center offered. Mother Eloise stayed close by, offering quiet guidance when needed. When lunchtime arrived, Shanice pulled out her simple sandwich and found a quiet corner of the break room. She was just starting to feel like she might actually belong here when a group of teenagers burst in, their voices loud and careless. "Hey, look at Ms. Big Baldy over there!" One of the boys called out, nudging his friends. "What happened to your hair, lady? Lawnmower accident." Laughter erupted from the group. Shanice's hands began to shake, her sandwich forgotten. The cruel words brought back Andre's voice, his hands roughly cutting away her hair, his taunts about her appearance. She stood quickly, keeping her head down, and hurried from the break room. The teenagers' laughter followed her down the hall as she pushed into the women's restroom, locking herself in a stall. Hot tears spilled down her cheeks as she pressed her hands against her mouth to muffle her sobs. A gentle knock came at the stall door. "Shanice! Child, open up!" It was Mother Eloise. Shanice wiped her eyes quickly but didn't move. "Those children don't know what they're talking about," Mother Eloise continued softly. "And shame only sticks if you let it." Something in those words made Shanice's breath catch. Slowly, she unlocked the door. Mother Eloise stood there, concern etched on her face but no pity, just understanding and strength. "I know there's a story behind that hair," the older woman said gently, "and whenever you're ready to share it, I'm here to listen. But right now, we're going to fix your makeup, hold our heads high, and show those children that their words can't touch your spirit." Mother Eloise pulled a tissue from her purse and carefully dabbed at Shanice's tears. "You want to know something? I see beauty in that short hair of yours. It shows you're a survivor. Whatever battle you fought to get here, you won. Remember that." The afternoon passed more quietly. The teenagers avoided the front desk, perhaps warned off by Mother Eloise's stern words. Shanice focused on her work, gradually finding a rhythm to the day. As evening approached and the center began to empty, Shanice started her closing duties. The building felt peaceful now, with most of the staff and visitors gone. Without really meaning to, she began to hum softly as she worked, an old gospel tune her grandmother used to sing. The melody grew stronger as she moved through her tasks, and soon quiet words joined the tune. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound! The familiar hymn filled the empty lobby, her voice carrying the weight of years of pain and hope. She was so lost in the music that she didn't notice Cameron standing in the hallway, listening with an expression of wonder on his face. As the last note faded, he remained still, thinking of all the lives that voice had touched before, all the lives it could touch again. That voice didn't belong hidden behind a reception desk. It belonged somewhere it could heal hearts and lift spirits, but he knew better than to push too fast. For now, he simply watched as Shanice gathered her things, her own heart lighter for having sung again, even if she thought no one had heard. There would be time for more. For now, it was enough that she was here, taking those first tentative steps toward reclaiming her voice, both literally and figuratively. The rest would come in its own time, guided by grace and surrounded by people who saw her true worth. Cameron stood in the doorway of the community center's small conference room, watching as Shanice organized a stack of registration forms. The morning light filtered through the windows, catching the growing fuzz of her hair. In just a week, she'd settled into her role at the front desk, bringing a gentle efficiency that visitors immediately responded to. He cleared his throat softly. "Got a minute?" Shanice looked up, startled. Though she no longer flinched when he approached, there was still a wariness in her eyes that made his heart ache. "Of course, Mr. Holt." "Cameron," he corrected gently, taking a seat across from her. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." He pulled out a glossy brochure and placed it on the desk between them. "The Foundation is hosting our annual Hope Rising Gala next month. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year." Shanice nodded, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the brochure. "I've been helping with some of the paperwork. What you might not know is that we always feature local talent, people whose lives have been touched by the Foundation's work." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your voice. It embodies everything this gala represents. Hope reborn. Second chances. Would you consider performing?" The color drained from Shanice's face. "No," she said quickly, pushing back from the desk. "No, I can't. I'm sorry, but I don't do that anymore. Just one song." Cameron pressed gently. "The same one from the Grace Project video. People still talk about how it moved them." "Please," Shanice whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "I can't be up there with everyone looking at me. Not like this." Her hand went unconsciously to her short hair. Mother Eloise appeared in the doorway, her presence warm and steady. "I couldn't help but overhear," she said, moving into the room. "Shanice, child, sometimes God's plans are bigger than our fears." Shanice shook her head, tears threatening. "I'm not ready." "Then start smaller," Mother Eloise suggested, settling into a chair beside her. "Help organize the event. Get comfortable being part of it first. The rest will come in God's timing." Cameron nodded eagerly. "We could use your help with the planning committee. Your insight would be invaluable." Before Shanice could respond, the sharp click of heels announced another arrival. Lena Grayson stood in the doorway, her tailored suit a stark contrast to the center's casual atmosphere. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she surveyed the scene. "Cameron, do you have a moment?" she asked, her tone professionally pleasant but cool. He followed her into the hallway, where her facade dropped immediately. "This needs to stop," she hissed in a low voice. Your attachment to this woman is becoming noticeable." "Attachment?" Cameron's voice held a warning edge. "The Foundation has an image to maintain. Having some damaged charity case as the face of our gala. The board won't stand for it." "Shanice Rivers isn't a charity case," Cameron said firmly. "She's exactly the kind of person this foundation was built to support. Real people, real stories, real impact, not headlines." "Be reasonable," Lena pressed. "Look at her. She's clearly been through something unsavory. Do you really want that kind of attention?" Cameron's expression hardened. "This meeting is over, Lena. The Foundation's direction isn't up for debate." Back in the conference room, Shanice sat quietly with Mother Eloise, their voices low in prayer. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," Shanice admitted. "Strength isn't about not being afraid," Mother Eloise replied. "It's about doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified. Just think about it, child." That night, in her small apartment, Shanice sat cross-legged on her bed with her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing her name and Grace Project into the search bar. The video appeared immediately. She looked so different then, with her long hair and confident smile. But it was the comments that caught her eye. This voice brought me to tears. So much hope in these dark times. Playing this on repeat. It's like a healing balm. God bless this angel. Her song helped me hold on when I wanted to give up. Shanice touched the screen gently, remembering how those words had once lifted her spirit. Maybe she couldn't sing yet, but she could still help. Still be part of bringing hope to others, even from behind the scenes. With trembling fingers, she opened her email and began to type. "Dear Cameron, I've thought about your offer. While I'm not ready to perform, I would be honored to help with the Gala Planning Committee. Sometimes small steps are all we can manage. Thank you for understanding." Miles away, in his penthouse office overlooking Atlanta's glittering skyline, Cameron's phone chimed with the incoming message. A smile spread across his face as he read her words. Outside his window, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing a story, a struggle, a chance for redemption, just like Shanice's. The autumn sun streamed through the community center's windows as Shanice organized folders at the front desk. 2 weeks had passed since she'd started working there, and slowly the place began feeling like home. The staff greeted her warmly each morning, and even the regular visitors stopped staring at her short hair. "Miss Shanice!" a familiar voice called out. Tasha bounded through the entrance, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. The teenager's bright yellow hoodie stood out against her dark skin, and her box braids swayed as she moved. "Shouldn't you be in school?" Shanice asked, trying to sound stern but failing to hide her smile. "Half day," Tasha replied, hopping onto the desk counter. "Besides, I got that spoken word piece to work on for the gala, remember?" Shanice had grown fond of the girl's quick wit and fierce spirit. Despite bouncing between foster homes, Tasha maintained a sharp sense of humor that masked deeper hurts. In many ways, she reminded Shanice of herself at that age, before everything went wrong. "All right then," Shanice said, pulling out her chair. "Show me what you've got." Tasha pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket and smoothed it against her thigh. "It's kind of rough." "That's okay. Start from the beginning." The teenager took a deep breath and began reciting. "They say home is where the heart is. But what if your heart's been torn apart? Foster care to foster care, sometimes feeling like spare parts." Shanice listened intently as Tasha's words painted pictures of broken homes and resilient dreams. When she finished, the silence hung heavy with emotion. "That was beautiful," Shanice said softly. "Want to record it? We can use the music room." Tasha's eyes lit up. "For real? Like professional recording?" Well, semi-professional. Shanice laughed, leading her down the hallway. Cameron installed some basic equipment for the youth program. In the small recording booth, Shanice showed Tasha how to position the microphone. As she adjusted the settings, memories of her own recording sessions flooded back. The excitement, the nerves, the pure joy of creating something meaningful. Okay, Shanice said through the intercom. Whenever you're ready. Tasha closed her eyes and began speaking, her words flowing more confidently this time. Shanice watched through the glass, moved by the raw honesty in the girl's performance. When Tasha finished, they played it back together, making small adjustments and trying different approaches. You're good at this, Tasha said during a break. Like really good. How come you never told me you used to be a singer? Shanice tensed slightly. That was a long time ago. But why'd you stop? I looked you up, you know. That hurricane video gave me chills. Before Shanice could respond, her phone buzzed. A notification appeared. Andre Jackson mentioned you in a post. Her heart stopped. With trembling fingers, she opened the link. There, on her ex-boyfriend's social media page, were the photos she'd tried so hard to forget. Her tear-stained face, her partially shaved head, all captured in cruel detail the night she finally left him. He'd tagged the Foundation's page with a sneering caption, "The Billionaire's charity case." Miss Shanice? Tasha's voice seemed far away. You okay? You look sick. The room spun as Shanice watched the post accumulating shares, comments, and cruel jokes. By evening, it had gone viral, spreading across multiple platforms. She barely remembered driving home, her vision blurred with tears. The next morning, camera flashes greeted her in the parking lot. Reporters shouted questions. Ms. Rivers, is it true you're using the Foundation for personal gain? Were you and Mr. Holt involved before your makeover? Comment on the domestic violence allegations? Shanice froze, her legs refusing to move. Then a warm hand caught hers. Keep walking. Cameron's steady voice came from beside her. He'd appeared seemingly out of nowhere, dressed in his usual simple attire. They can only hurt you if you let them. Mr. Holt. A reporter thrust a microphone forward. Your board of directors suggests distancing the Foundation from this controversy. Any response? Cameron stopped, turning to face the cameras directly. His hand remained firmly clasped around Shanice's. The New Light Foundation exists to help people rebuild their lives with dignity. Ms. Rivers embodies everything we stand for: courage, resilience, and the strength to rise above cruelty. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. He guided her through the doors, past the stunned reporters, and into the quiet of the lobby. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the floor. I'm so sorry, Shanice whispered, her voice breaking. I've ruined everything. Your reputation, the Foundation's image. Look at me, Cameron said softly. She raised her eyes reluctantly to meet his. They can mock, but they can't define you. What that man did, that's on him, not you. Shanice nodded. But as the day wore on and more news outlets picked up the story, doubt crept back in. That evening, after everyone had gone home, she stood alone in the darkening lobby. The same question kept circling in her mind. Had she just destroyed the only good thing she'd found in years? Outside, the last camera crew packed up their equipment. Inside, the shadows lengthened across the empty hallways. Shanice touched the smooth surface of the reception desk, her desk, and wondered if she'd still be sitting here tomorrow, or if this sanctuary would become just another lost dream. The security lights clicked off automatically, leaving only the soft glow of the exit signs. In the darkness, Shanice couldn't tell if the wetness on her cheeks came from fear or gratitude. Fear of losing this place, or gratitude for having found it at all. The morning after the media storm, Cameron called an emergency staff meeting at the New Light Community Center. Sunlight streamed through the windows as employees gathered in the main hall, their faces etched with concern. Shanice sat in the back row, trying to make herself invisible. "I know many of you have seen the news," Cameron began, his voice steady and clear. "But this foundation wasn't built on public opinion. It was built on hope." He paused, scanning the room. "That's why we're not just continuing with our annual gala. We're transforming it into something more meaningful. This year's theme will be Hope and Healing." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Shanice felt her chest tighten as Cameron continued. "Every person in this room has a story of overcoming. That's what we're celebrating. Not wealth, not status, but the human spirit's capacity to rise above pain." Over the next few days, Shanice threw herself into gala preparations, grateful for the distraction. She coordinated with vendors, organized rehearsal schedules for the youth choir, and managed endless spreadsheets. The online gossip began to fade, replaced by more pressing celebrity scandals. The choir kids became her sanctuary. During practice sessions, she helped them with their harmonies, surprised by how naturally teaching came to her. Tasha, especially, stuck close by, as if appointed as Shanice's unofficial protector. "You should sing with us," Tasha said one afternoon while they sorted through sheet music. "For real, Miss Shanice, the way you hum along when you think no one's listening, that's the real deal." Shanice just smiled and changed the subject, though something inside her ached at the suggestion. One evening, long after most staff had left, Shanice sat at her desk reviewing seating arrangements. The center was quiet except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning. She didn't hear Cameron approach until he spoke. "It's 9:30, he said, making her jump. "You've been here since 7 this morning." Shanice looked up, surprised to see him in his usual casual clothes rather than the suits he wore to board meetings. "Just trying to get ahead of tomorrow's schedule," she explained. "The schedule can wait. Come on, I'm walking you home." "Oh no, that's not necessary. It's not up for discussion," he said firmly. "These streets aren't safe at night." Reluctantly, Shanice gathered her things. They walked in comfortable silence for a few blocks, the evening air warm and heavy with approaching summer. Street lamps cast long shadows on the sidewalk. "You know," Cameron said finally, "watching you these past few days, it reminds me of someone." "Who's that?" He was quiet for so long that Shanice thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was different, softer, weighted with memory. Her name was Destiny Williams. She was part of one of my first major charity initiatives back when I was just starting out. We were building affordable housing units in Detroit. He stopped walking, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. "I was so focused on proving myself, on showing the world that a black man from nothing could make it big and give back. I rushed things, cut corners I shouldn't have." Shanice felt a chill despite the warm night. "What happened?" "Carbon monoxide leak. Faulty heating system that should have been caught in inspection." His voice cracked slightly. Destiny was 22. A single mum working 2 jobs, finally had a place of her own. She never woke up. "Oh, Cameron." Shanice touched his arm without thinking. "That's why I'm hands-on with everything now. Why I check every detail personally." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting streetlight. "People think it's about control or micromanaging, but really I just can't bear the thought of failing someone else who trusts me." They resumed walking, but something had shifted between them. Shanice saw him differently now, not as the untouchable billionaire, but as someone carrying his own deep wounds. "We're all broken somehow," she said quietly. "Maybe that's why God puts us in each other's paths." Cameron nodded slowly. Maybe so. They reached her apartment building, a modest brick structure with window air conditioning units humming in the night. Before heading inside, Shanice turned to him. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the walk, but for seeing past the mess, for standing by me when it would have been easier not to. Thank you for trusting us, for trusting me." Later that night, Shanice knelt beside her bed, hands clasped in prayer. The moonlight painted silver patches on her worn carpet as she whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for sending someone who understands. Someone who sees me, really sees me, and stays anyway." She paused, adding softly, "And Lord, help him forgive himself too." The night settled around her like a gentle blanket, and for the first time in weeks, she felt truly at peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because she wasn't carrying her brokenness alone anymore. The morning sun streamed through the community center's windows, casting warm patches on the worn carpet of the choir room. Shanice stood before a group of teenagers, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Mother Eloise sat at the piano, her encouraging smile never wavering. "Okay, everyone," Shanice began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's start with some breathing exercises." "We can't hear you, Miss Shanice," Tasha called out from the back row, but her tone was playful rather than mocking. Shanice cleared her throat and tried again, this time louder. "Right. Let's start by standing tall, shoulders back." The teens shuffled to their feet, some rolling their eyes, others watching her with curiosity. Shanice demonstrated the proper posture, remembering her own choir days. "Now, breathe in through your nose for 4 counts," she instructed, lifting her hands to guide them. "Hold for 4, then release for 8 counts, like you're blowing through a straw." The room filled with exaggerated breathing sounds, followed by giggles. But Shanice pressed on, showing them how to properly support their breath from their diaphragm. "Y'all sound like a bunch of sleepy dragons," Mother Eloise chuckled from the piano. "But that's exactly right. Keep going, Shanice." As they moved through vocal exercises, Shanice felt something inside her begin to loosen. The familiar patterns of warm-ups brought back memories of joy, not pain. She led them through scales, watching faces light up as voices blended together. "Now let's try some fun ones," she said, growing bolder. "Repeat after me. Zip, zap, zop." The teens echoed her, laughing as they exaggerated the consonants. Soon the room was filled with playful sounds. Red leather, yellow leather, and unique New York, as they practiced diction exercises. "Miss Shanice got jokes," someone called out, and genuine laughter rippled through the group. By the time they started working on actual songs, the atmosphere had transformed. Even the most reluctant participants were engaged, swaying to the rhythm as Mother Eloise's piano filled the room with rich chords. During a water break, Shanice sat at the piano, her fingers finding familiar patterns. Without thinking, she began to play a melody that had been forming in her mind for days. Words flowed naturally. "From these ashes beauty rises, through these tears new life appears. When I thought that hope had left me, you were there to hold my fears." She stopped abruptly, realizing the room had gone silent. Everyone was staring at her. "Girl," Mother Eloise said softly, "did you just write that?" Shanice nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "It's just something I've been working on, called Beauty for Ashes." "Keep going," Tasha urged, moving closer to the piano. "Please." Taking a deep breath, Shanice continued. "Every scar tells a story, every wound becomes a door. Where your grace meets my weakness, I'm not broken anymore." Unknown to her, Cameron had stopped in the hallway, drawn by the music. He leaned against the door frame, out of sight, listening as Shanice's voice filled the space with raw emotion. The song built to its chorus, and some of the teens began humming along, picking up the melody naturally. You make beauty from these ashes. You bring healing to these scars. In the pieces of my breaking I find who you truly are. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence before the room erupted in applause. Shanice blushed, ducking her head. That's it, Cameron said, finally stepping into the room. Everyone turned, surprised by his presence. That's your song for the gala. Shanice's eyes widened. Oh no, I couldn't. You can, he said firmly, walking towards the piano. And you will. That song, it's not just your story, it's everyone's story who's ever felt broken and found hope again. He's right, child, Mother Eloise added, placing a gentle hand on Shanice's shoulder. Sometimes God gives us a song not just for ourselves, but for others who need to hear it. Over the next few days, Shanice worked with the choir, teaching them the harmonies for Beauty for Ashes. Each practice brought more confidence, though her hands still shook at the thought of performing. The night before the gala, she stood in her apartment, studying her reflection. The simple blue dress Cameron had sent over hung perfectly, modest yet elegant. Her hair, though still short, had been styled beautifully by the center's volunteer stylist. But it was her eyes that caught her attention. They held a spark she hadn't seen in years. Shanice touched the mirror gently, remembering all the times she'd avoided her own reflection. Lord, she whispered, her voice trembling but determined, don't let me hide anymore. The dress moved softly as she turned away from the mirror, its color reminiscent of deep water, of baptism, of new beginnings. Tomorrow would change everything, not because of the performance itself, but because finally, after so long, she was choosing to be seen. On her bedside table, her phone lit up with a text from Cameron. The song is perfect. You're ready. She smiled, knowing that ready or not, it was time to step into the light. The Atlanta Civic Center glowed against the darkening sky, its entrance alive with camera flashes and the hushed excitement of arriving guests. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in cream linens, each centerpiece featuring delicate white roses and golden candles. Shanice stood in the dimly lit wings of the stage, her fingers trembling around the microphone. Her heart thundered so loudly she feared the backstage crew might hear it. The royal blue dress Cameron had given her felt both like armor and a spotlight, protecting her, yet making her visible in a way she hadn't been in years. Beneath the wig she'd chosen to wear, her scalp tingled with nervous energy. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of hundreds of voices, business leaders, celebrities, politicians, all gathered for the New Light Community Center's Hope and Healing Gala. The thought made her stomach clench. These weren't the friendly faces from the center. These were people who'd seen those humiliating photos online, who might be judging her even now. 5 minutes, Ms. Rivers, a stagehand whispered, adjusting his headset. Shanice closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. The lyrics of her song ran through her mind, but the words seemed to scatter like leaves in wind. What if she forgot them? What if her voice cracked? What if— There you are. The deep, familiar voice made her turn. Cameron stood in the shadows, cutting an impressive figure in his black tuxedo. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Warm, steady, filled with something that looked like pride. I can't do this, she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. There are so many people out there, Cameron. Important people. What if— He stepped closer, his presence somehow both grounding and electrifying. Those important people out there, they're just people. Same as the kids at the center, same as you and me. But after everything with Andre, the photos— Listen to me, Cameron said, his voice gentle but firm. "If you lose your courage, borrow mine. I've got plenty to spare tonight." A small laugh escaped her, shaky but real. "Is that what billionaires do? Loan out courage?" "Only to songwriters who are about to change lives." He smiled, then grew serious. "You know what I see when I look at you, Shanice?" She shook her head, fighting, the urge to look away. "I see someone who walked through fire and came out singing. That's the story they need to hear tonight. Not the polished version, the real one. Your truth." The stagehand reappeared. 2 minutes. Cameron squeezed her hand once, then stepped back. "Show them who you really are. The rest will take care of itself." Mother Eloise appeared next, wrapping Shanice in a quick hug that smelled of lavender and wisdom. "Remember what we practiced. Deep breaths, child. Let the spirit do the rest." The introduction began, and Shanice heard her name announced. Her legs felt like water as she stepped into the harsh stage lights. The audience stretched before her, faces both curious and expectant. Camera phones glinted like stars in the darkness. The piano introduction began, Mother Eloise's familiar touch on the keys providing an anchor. Shanice lifted the microphone, and her voice emerged, tentative at first. "From these ashes, beauty rises through these tears, new life appears." The sound carried across the silent hall, gathering strength with each note. As she moved into the second verse, something shifted inside her. The fear didn't vanish, but it transformed into something else. Determination, perhaps. Or grace. "Every scar tells a story, every wound becomes a door." Her hands moved to her wig, fingers trembling but sure. In one smooth motion, she removed it, revealing her short, uneven hair, the physical reminder of her lowest moment. Gasps rippled through the audience. She heard a few murmurs, saw some phones raised higher, but then something remarkable happened. As she continued singing, her voice growing stronger, she saw faces in the crowd beginning to soften. Some women were wiping tears. A teenage girl near the front was nodding, her own close-cropped hair catching the light. "You make beauty from these ashes. You bring healing to these scars. In the pieces of my breaking, I find who you truly are." The teen choir joined in from the back of the hall, their voices rising in perfect harmony. Shanice felt tears on her cheeks, but kept singing, her voice soaring over the music. This wasn't about being perfect anymore. This was about being real. The applause started before the last note faded. It began slowly, then built like a wave until the entire audience was on their feet. Through her tears, Shanice saw Cameron in the wing, clashing with his usual composure as he wiped his eyes. "I'm not hiding anymore," she whispered into the microphone, her voice carrying across the still clapping crowd. The response was immediate. Cheers, more applause, and what sounded like a few amens from the back. Later, after the speeches and donations and congratulations, Shanice found herself following Cameron up a narrow staircase. "Where are we going?" she asked, careful of her heels on the steps. "You'll see," he said, pushing open a heavy door at the top. They emerged onto the Civic Center's rooftop terrace. The Atlanta skyline sparkled against the night sky, and above, stars peppered the darkness. The spring air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of blooming dogwoods from the streets below. "I thought you might need a quiet moment," Cameron said, loosening his bow tie. "You transformed that room tonight, Shanice." She leaned against the railing, letting the breeze cool her flushed cheeks. "I've never felt anything like that before. Even when the video went viral, it wasn't the same. This felt real," he finished, "because this time you weren't hiding." Their eyes met in the starlight, and something electric passed between them. Shanice felt her heart skip, recognizing the shift in the air. This wasn't just about mentorship or charity anymore. This was something deeper, something that made her both thrilled and terrified. Cameron stepped closer, his presence warm in the cool night air. You know, when I first saw you at the center, I thought I was there to help you heal. But watching you tonight, seeing your courage, maybe I'm the one who needed healing all along. A shooting star streaked across the sky above them, and for a moment they both fell silent, watching its arc of light. In that quiet, star-filled moment, Shanice realized that sometimes the greatest transformations happen not when we're trying to change ourselves, but when we finally allow ourselves to be exactly who we are. The morning sun filtered through Shanice's thin curtains as her phone buzzed relentlessly on her nightstand. She blinked away sleep, reaching for it with uncertainty. The screen was filled with notifications, hundreds of them. Messages, tweets, Instagram tags, and news alerts bombarded her all at once. Her heart jumped when she saw the video from last night had already reached over 1 million views. With trembling fingers, she opened the first news article. Viral sensation. Woman's brave performance becomes symbol of self-love. Below was a photo of her on stage, head held high, tears streaming down her face as she sang. The comment section overflowed with support. This made me cry, so much strength. Finally, someone real showing what healing looks like. Thank you for giving me courage to face my own scars. Shanice sat up in bed, overwhelmed by the response. Her phone kept buzzing as more notifications poured in. Women from across the country were sharing their own stories of survival and healing, many posting photos of their own scars and transformed appearances. She scrolled through message after message, tears welling up in her eyes. One particularly touched her heart, a teenage girl who wrote, "I was assaulted last year and haven't left my house since. But watching you stand there, so brave, I'm going to try going outside today." Mother Eloise called around 9 o'clock, her voice warm with pride. "Child, you've started something beautiful. The center's phone hasn't stopped ringing. People want to know how they can help, how they can be part of this movement." Shanice smiled, wiping away happy tears. "I still can't believe it, Mother E. It feels like a dream." "No dream, baby. This is God's work right here." The morning flew by in a whirlwind of calls and messages. Local news stations wanted interviews. Talk shows were reaching out. Even her old church members were sending congratulations. Around noon, she finally got dressed and headed to the center, feeling lighter than she had in years. People on the street recognized her, offering warm smiles and words of encouragement. One woman even hugged her, whispering, "Thank you for helping me feel beautiful again." But when she arrived at the center, something felt off. The usual warmth was replaced by tension. Staff members whispered in corners, avoiding her eyes. Her stomach knotted as she made her way to her desk. Tasha, the teenage girl she'd befriended, rushed up to her with wide eyes. "Shanice, have you seen it? It's all over Twitter." "Seen what?" Before Tasha could answer, Cameron's business partner, Lena Grayson, stormed through the front doors, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her face was tight with controlled fury as she waved her tablet in the air. "Conference room. Now," Lena commanded, not even looking at Shanice. Inside the conference room, Cameron sat at the table, his usual confident posture replaced by something heavy and defeated. He looked up as Shanice entered, and the pain in his eyes made her step back. "What's going on?" Shanice asked, her voice small. Lena slapped a tabloid article onto the table. The headline made Shanice's blood run cold. "Billionaire's calculated deception. How Cameron Holt exploited an abuse survivor for PR gold." The article included screenshots of what appeared to be internal documents, emails discussing finding the perfect sob story and maximizing sympathy appeal. There were even apparent payment records suggesting Shanice had been paid to share her story. This is impossible, Shanice whispered, her hands shaking as she read. These are fake. They have to be. Of course they're fake, Cameron said, his voice rough with emotion. But the damage is done. 3 major donors have already pulled out. The board has frozen all accounts pending investigation. Shanice felt the room spinning. Everything she'd felt that morning, the joy, the pride, the sense of purpose, crumbled away, leaving only a familiar, bitter taste of betrayal. Was this all for your image? She demanded, her voice breaking. Did you see me that first day and think, perfect, here's my chance to look like a hero? Shanice, no. Cameron stood, reaching for her, but she backed away. I trusted you, she continued, tears flowing freely now. I let myself believe. I thought... She couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of humiliation crushed her chest, making it hard to breathe. Cameron stood there, speechless, his hands hanging helplessly at his sides. The man who always had the right words, who could charm any room and solve any problem, could only stare as she fell apart in front of him. I quit, Shanice said quietly, pulling off her name badge and dropping it on the table. Don't call me. Don't try to explain. Just leave me alone. She fled the conference room, ignoring the stares of staff members and the sound of Cameron calling her name. She ran past Mother Eloise, past Tasha's concerned face, past the security guard who tried to stop her. The sunny day now felt harsh and exposing. She pulled her hood up, walking quickly, trying to disappear into the crowd. Her phone kept buzzing. Probably more notifications about the scandal, more people discovering how foolish she'd been. Back in his office that evening, Cameron sat alone in the growing darkness. The city lights began to twinkle outside his window, but he barely noticed them. His eyes were fixed on a framed photo on his desk, Shanice on stage the night before, captured in a moment of pure transcendence. No wig, no mask, no pretense. Just radiant, authentic beauty. He touched the glass gently, remembering how it felt to watch her transform on that stage. How her courage had awakened something in him he thought was long dead. How her voice had reached past all his carefully constructed walls and touched his soul. The photo blurred as tears filled his eyes. In trying to help her heal, she had begun to heal him. And now, because of someone's malicious lies, he might lose not just the Foundation's work, but the one person who had made him believe in redemption again. His phone lay silent on the desk. No missed calls, no messages from her, just the endless notifications about the scandal, about his supposed manipulation, about the Foundation's frozen accounts. But none of that mattered compared to the look in her eyes when she'd confronted him. That devastating mixture of hurt and betrayal that he'd seen too many times in his life. The truth was there in the frame before him. Shanice, standing in her truth, showing the world what real courage looked like. And he, for all his billions and influence, hadn't been able to protect her from this new pain. The days after Shanice's departure from the center stretched like shadows at sunset. Each morning, she walked the 3 blocks from her apartment to Mother Eloise's church, St. Anne's, a weathered brick building with stained glass windows that had seen better days. The small church sat on the outskirts of Atlanta, far from the gleaming towers of downtown where her dreams had briefly soared. Inside the church's worn wooden doors, Shanice found peace in simple tasks. Her hands stayed busy wiping down pews, arranging donated clothes, and stirring large pots of soup for the homeless ministry. The routine helped quiet her mind, though her heart still ached. Child, you're scrubbing those floors like they personally offended you, Mother Eloise observed one afternoon, her warm voice carrying across the empty sanctuary. Shanice managed a weak smile, her knees sore from kneeling on the hard floor. Just trying to keep busy, Mother. And And how's that working for keeping the hurt away? Shanice sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. I trusted him, Mother. I really thought... She shook her head, unable to finish. Mother Eloise lowered herself onto a nearby pew with a soft grunt. You know what I see? I see two wounded people letting pride keep them apart. During evening prayers, Shanice would often find herself by the old upright piano, her fingers trailing across the keys. Her voice would rise softly in the dimness, filling the chapel with hymns that spoke of grace and redemption. The homeless men and women who came for shelter would stop and listen, their weathered faces softening at the sound. Across town, the New Light Community Center was fighting for survival. Cameron's company faced mounting criticism as more tabloids picked up the story. Major donors withdrew their support, leaving programs hanging by a thread. But Cameron refused to let it die. He began quietly selling his personal assets, his vacation homes, his art collection, his fleet of luxury cars. Every dollar went to keeping the center's doors open. Late at night, after the staff had gone home, he would come in alone. Trading his expensive suits for paint-stained clothes, he worked by himself, repainting walls, fixing broken fixtures, and doing whatever repairs he could manage. One evening, as he stood on a ladder touching up the ceiling, his phone buzzed with another crisis. 3 more corporate sponsors had pulled out. Cameron closed his eyes, letting his head rest against the wall. The paint roller felt heavy in his hand. Mr. Holt. The voice startled him. He looked down to see Marcus, the night janitor, standing below. You missed a spot, Marcus said quietly, pointing to a corner. Then he picked up another roller and started working on the opposite wall. No questions asked, no explanation needed. 2 weeks after Shanice left, Tasha showed up at St. Anne's just as the evening meal service was ending. Her usual confident stride was hesitant as she approached Shanice in the kitchen. Hey, Tasha said, fidgeting with the sleeve of her hoodie. Place isn't the same without you. Shanice kept wiping down the counter, afraid to meet the girl's eyes. I can't go back, Tasha, you know that. Why? Because of some lies. Tasha pulled a flash drive from her pocket and set it on the counter. Found this in Lena Grayson's office when I was borrowing some supplies. Shanice finally looked up. What is it? Proof. She's the one who leaked those fake documents. Been planning it for months, trying to take down Mr. Holt because he wouldn't do business her way anymore. Tasha's voice grew fierce. You always told me everyone deserves a second chance. That's what you said when I got caught stealing from the center, remember? That was different. Was it? You said God doesn't give up on people, so we shouldn't either. Tasha pushed the flash drive closer. You taught me that. After Tasha left, Shanice sat alone in the dark sanctuary, the flash drive heavy in her palm. Moonlight filtered through the stained glass, painting colored shadows on the floor. She thought about Cameron's gentle hands that first day, fixing her broken spirit along with her hair. She remembered his quiet strength when he walked her past the cameras, choosing her dignity over his reputation. The hours crept by as she prayed, tears running down her face. Her own words to Tasha echoed in her mind. Everyone deserves a second chance. Pride warred with forgiveness in her heart as the moon tracked across the sky. Finally, as the first grey light of dawn crept through the windows, Shanice wiped her eyes. The morning silence felt different somehow, clearer, like the air after rain. Okay, Lord, she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the stillness. I hear you. The flash drive lay on the altar before her, a small thing to carry such weight. But then, she thought, the biggest changes often came from the smallest acts of grace. Outside, the city was waking up. Another day was beginning, bringing with it the chance to choose bitterness or healing, pride or forgiveness. In the growing light, Shanice rose from her knees, knowing which path she had to take. The morning sun cast long shadows through the community center's windows as Shanice stood outside, her heart pounding. Through the glass doors, she could see Cameron in old jeans and a faded t-shirt, methodically sweeping the empty lobby. His shoulders carried a weariness she'd never noticed before. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The familiar squeak made Cameron look up, and the broom clattered to the floor. His eyes widened in disbelief, dark circles beneath them telling stories of sleepless nights. "Shanice!" His voice was barely a whisper. She walked toward him slowly, the flash drive clutched tightly in her hand. Without speaking, she held it out. Their fingers brushed as he took it, sending a jolt through her that had nothing to do with static electricity. "What's this?" he asked, turning the small device over in his palm. "The truth," Shanice replied softly. "You should watch it." Cameron moved to the reception desk where his laptop sat open. Shanice followed, maintaining a careful distance as he plugged in the drive. The screen flickered to life with security footage from Lena's office. The video showed Lena at her desk, speaking on the phone. Her voice came through clearly. "Yes, forge whatever documents you need. Make it look like Cameron paid her to perform. Once the story breaks, the board will have no choice but to remove him." She laughed coldly. He's gotten too soft, too focused on these worthless charity cases. The foundation needs stronger leadership. More videos played. Lena meeting with tabloid reporters, arranging wire transfers, orchestrating the whole scandal. With each revelation, Cameron's face grew darker. When the last video ended, he sat completely still, his hands clenched into fists. "Tasha found it," Shanice explained quietly. "She was in Lena's office and—" She trailed off, not wanting to admit the girl had been stealing supplies again. "And she brought it to you," Cameron finished, understanding in his voice. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with pain. "Shanice, I'm so sorry. I should have—" "No," she interrupted, stepping closer. "I'm the one who should apologize. I doubted you. After everything you did for me, I still ran away at the first sign of trouble." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I was so scared of being used again. I couldn't see that you were different." Cameron stood slowly, closing the distance between them. "I should have trusted your strength from the beginning," he said. "Instead, I tried to protect you, shield you from everything. I was so focused on fixing things, I forgot that sometimes people just need space to heal themselves." Shanice felt the walls around her heart crumbling. "God's been teaching us both lessons, hasn't he? Humbling us," Cameron agreed with a sad smile. "Showing us that pride and fear can blind us to his grace." They stood in silence for a moment, the morning light warming the space between them. Then, without thinking, Shanice stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Cameron stiffened in surprise before melting into the embrace, his tears falling into her short hair. "I missed you," he whispered. "I missed this place," she replied, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I missed the music, the kids, the purpose." They pulled apart slowly, both wiping their eyes and laughing softly at their tears. Cameron's face lit up suddenly. "You know what we need?" "What?" "A Christmas Eve concert. Something to bring everyone back together, to show the community what this place is really about." Shanice's heart leaped at the idea. The choir kids would love that, and it's only 2 weeks away. "Perfect timing," Cameron said, already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling Mother Eloise. Can you get hold of Tasha?" Within an hour, they were all gathered in the center's main room. Cameron, Shanice, Mother Eloise, and Tasha. The elderly woman's eyes sparkled as they discussed plans, while Tasha tried to hide her proud smile at how her discovery had helped heal the rift. "We'll need to work fast," Mother Eloise said, making notes in her small notebook. Get the word out, prepare the music, clean this place up. I can handle publicity, Cameron offered. The right kind this time. And I'll work with the choir, Shanice added. She paused, then smiled. I think it's time to teach them Beauty for Ashes. As if on cue, she began humming the melody softly. The sound echoed through the room, filling the empty spaces with hope. Tasha joined in first, her clear voice harmonizing perfectly. Then Mother Eloise added her rich alto, and even Cameron hummed along. The music swelled naturally, like a sunrise breaking through clouds. Other voices joined in as staff members and early arriving students peeked in, drawn by the sound. Soon the room was filled with harmony, everyone finding their own part in the impromptu choir. Shanice looked around at the faces, some marked by hardship, others by joy, all united in song. This was what the center was meant to be, a place where broken pieces came together to make something beautiful. Through the windows, the morning sun seemed to shine brighter, blessing their new beginning with golden light. The song ended, but its echo lingered in the air, a promise of restoration and renewal. Mother Eloise wiped a tear from her eye and said simply, "Now that's what I call a proper homecoming." The community center hummed with renewed energy as preparations for the Christmas Eve concert transformed the space. Handmade paper snowflakes dangled from the ceiling, catching light and casting delicate shadows across the walls. The scent of pine from fresh garland mixed with the aroma of cinnamon and hot chocolate from the kitchen. Shanice stood on a stepladder, carefully hanging a string of twinkling lights while watching a group of teens craft ornaments at nearby tables. Their laughter filled the room as they worked with glitter, ribbons, and recycled materials. "Miss Shanice, look at this one." Tasha held up an intricately folded paper star, its edges trimmed in silver. "Think it's good enough for the main entrance?" "It's beautiful," Shanice said, climbing down to get a better look. "You've got a real talent for this." Cameron appeared from his office, rolling up his sleeves. He'd been on the phone most of the morning, but his face carried none of the strain from earlier days. "The local news just called," he announced. "Channel 5 wants to cover the concert. They're sending a crew tomorrow to film some of the preparations." A ripple of excitement passed through the room. Mother Eloise, who'd been directing the placement of chairs, clasped her hands together. "Lord, you sure do work in mysterious ways. First snow in the forecast, and now this." "Snow?" Several voices echoed in disbelief. "That's what the weatherman says," she confirmed with a knowing smile. "A Christmas miracle for Atlanta." The teens chattered excitedly, but Shanice noticed Cameron had grown quiet. She found him staring at a spreadsheet on his tablet, his brow furrowed. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. He looked up, managing a smile. "Just running numbers. The foundation's accounts are still frozen, but—" He straightened his shoulders. "I've decided to fund the center privately until we restore public trust. My personal accounts can keep us running for years, if necessary." "Cameron, that's—" Shanice started, but he shook his head. "Money can build walls or heal hearts," he said simply. "I'd rather do the latter." He gestured around the room, at the teens working together, at the elderly, volunteers serving hot chocolate, at the walls now bright with decoration. This is what matters, not corporate accounts or board approval. Shanice felt tears prick her eyes. Before she could respond, Tasha called out, "Miss Shanice, it's almost time for choir practice." The afternoon melted into evening as they transformed the main hall into a concert venue. Borrowed chairs from local churches filled the space in neat rows. Someone had found an old Christmas tree in storage, and soon it sparkled with the teens' handmade ornaments. As darkness fell outside, the choir gathered for their final rehearsal. The soft church lights cast a warm glow over the assembled faces. Young and old, each with their own story of healing and hope. Shanice stood before them, no longer hiding behind baggy clothes or downcast eyes. "Let's start with the new arrangement of Silent Night," she said, her voice clear and confident. The piano introduction began, and she lifted her hands to conduct. The harmonies rose pure and strong, filling every corner of the room. They moved through their program, traditional carols, gospel favorites, and finally, Beauty for Ashes. Shanice had arranged it specially for the choir, weaving in parts for every voice. As they sang, she caught Cameron watching from the doorway, his eyes shining with pride and something deeper. The final note faded into silence, broken only by Mother Eloise's soft "Amen." "That's it," Shanice said, smiling at her choir. "You're ready?" As the singers gathered their things, chattering excitedly about the upcoming performance, Shanice noticed a change in the quality of light through the windows. She walked to the glass and gasped softly. Tiny white flakes were drifting down from the dark sky, dancing in the glow of the street lamps. A few of the teens pressed their faces to the windows, pointing and laughing in wonder at the rare sight. Mother Eloise appeared at Shanice's side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes," the older woman said softly, "God sends us little reminders that anything is possible." Shanice watched the snow fall, thinking about all the changes the past weeks had brought, her shattered confidence rebuilt, her voice reclaimed, her heart opening to trust again. Each snowflake seemed to carry its own small message of grace. The sound of carol singing rose spontaneously behind her as the choir gathered at the windows, their voices joining in harmony once more. Outside, the gentle snow continued to fall, blessing Atlanta with its rare and delicate gift, while inside, the warm lights glowed like beacons of hope in the gathering dark. Cameron moved to stand beside Shanice, their shoulders barely touching as they watched the snow transform their city into something magical. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The moment held all the words their hearts could say. Christmas Eve morning painted Atlanta in shades of pearl and gold. The sun's rays caught the remnants of yesterday's snow, making everything glitter like diamond dust. Shanice Rivers stood at her apartment window, watching her breath fog the glass as she wrapped a soft wool scarf around her growing curls. For the first time in what felt like forever, her reflection didn't make her flinch. Her short hair had started growing in thick and healthy, forming a delicate crown of tight curls that framed her face. More than that, though, it was her eyes that had changed. The fear that had haunted them for so long had given way to something steadier, something that looked a lot like peace. She touched the window gently, remembering another morning not so long ago when she'd hidden behind a hoodie, terrified of being seen. Now here she was, about to sing in front of hundreds of people. The thought made her stomach flutter, but it wasn't the paralyzing fear of before. This was different. This was anticipation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mother Eloise. "Child, the hall is already filling up. Get yourself down here when you're ready. And remember, you're carrying hope tonight." Shanice smiled, gathering her music folder and her courage. The teenage members of the choir had decorated it with stickers and encouraging messages. Tasha had written across the front in silver marker, "Our voice of truth." The drive to the community center concert hall took longer than usual. It seemed like all of Atlanta was heading somewhere special this Christmas Eve morning. As she pulled into the parking lot, she could already see the organized chaos unfolding. Volunteers scurried back and forth through the front doors, carrying everything from poinsettias to sound equipment. A news van from Channel 5 sat parked near the entrance, its crew setting up cameras and lights. Through the windows, Shanice could see the familiar faces of her choir members arriving, their excitement visible even from a distance. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with last-minute energy. The overhead lights flickered occasionally, old wiring acting up again, but nobody seemed to mind. Teenage choir members helped elderly volunteers hang the final decorations while camera crews wove between them, capturing the preparation. "Shanice!" Tasha's voice cut through the chaos. The teenager bounded over, wearing a red dress that made her look older than her 17 years. "We saved you some hot chocolate. Come on." In the makeshift green room, really just the center's break room decorated with tinsel, the choir members gathered, sipping hot chocolate and trying to calm their nerves. Mother Eloise moved among them like a gentle breeze, straightening bow ties and offering quiet words of encouragement. Cameron appeared in the doorway, looking both distinguished and approachable in a charcoal grey suit. His eyes found Shanice immediately, and his smile softened. "How are you feeling?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she answered truthfully. "Even if my knees are shaking a little." He laughed softly. "That makes two of us. The place is packed, standing room only. Even got some of my old business partners in the audience. Funny how things work out." Before Shanice could respond, one of the stage managers poked her head in. 5 minutes, everyone. Mr. Holt, you're up first." The choir members gathered in the wings, watching as Cameron stepped onto the stage. The lights had finally stopped flickering, bathing him in a warm glow as he approached the microphone. The packed audience fell silent. "Welcome," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "A few months ago, I thought I knew what this center needed. I thought it was about programs and funding and measurable outcomes." He paused, scanning the faces before him. "I was wrong. What this place needed, what we all needed, was something much simpler and much harder. Forgiveness, faith, the courage to believe in second chances." His eyes found Shanice in the wings, and his voice grew softer. "Tonight, you'll hear songs about hope and healing. You'll hear voices that were once silenced, now rising in joy. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember that grace isn't something we earn, it's something we receive, often when we least expect it." The audience applauded warmly as Cameron stepped back. Mother Eloise squeezed Shanice's hand. "Ready, child?" Shanice nodded, her heart pounding but her spirit steady. She walked onto the stage, the lights warm on her face, and took her place at the microphone. The choir filed in behind her, arranging themselves on the risers. The opening notes of "Beauty for Ashes" filled the hall, soft and clear. Shanice closed her eyes, letting the familiar melody wash over her. When she began to sing, her voice carried all the pain and triumph of her journey. "Out of darkness, into light. Every broken piece made right. Grace is calling, faith is falling like the rain." The choir joined in, their harmonies wrapping around her voice like a warm embrace. And then, halfway through the second verse, something unexpected happened. A new voice joined in, slightly off-key but full of heart. Shanice opened her eyes to find Cameron standing beside her, singing without a microphone, his face full of joy and vulnerability. The audience, moved by this unplanned moment of shared healing, began to rise. Phones captured the moment as tears flowed freely. News cameras panned across the scene, the unlikely pair on stage, the diverse choir behind them. The community joined together in hope. As they sang the final chorus, Shanice looked out at the sea of faces and saw her own story reflected back at her. Every person there carried their own wounds, their own need for grace. And here they all were, standing together, living proof that broken things could be made beautiful again. The song ended with a gentle fade, the last note hanging in the air like a prayer. For a moment, no one moved. Then the applause began, rolling through the hall like thunder, carrying with it the sound of healing, of celebration, of Christmas miracle. The morning sunlight streamed through Shanice's apartment windows as her phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. She reached for it groggily, then sat bolt upright as she saw the flood of notifications. Every major news outlet in Atlanta and beyond was running the story of last night's concert. "Atlanta's Christmas Miracle," read the headline on Channel 5 News. The morning shows were all featuring clips of the performance, focusing on the moment Cameron had joined her on stage. Social media was ablaze with shares and comments, most calling it the most touching Christmas moment of the year. Her phone rang. It was Mother Eloise. "Child, turn on your television right now," the older woman said, her voice trembling with excitement. Shanice fumbled for her remote and clicked on the morning news. There they were, she and Cameron, singing together, the choir swelling behind them. The camera had captured everything: the tears in the audience, the spontaneous standing ovation, the pure joy radiating from every face. The Christmas Eve concert at New Light Community Center has become an overnight sensation, the anchor was saying. What began as a local event has touched hearts across the nation, proving that sometimes the greatest miracles come wrapped in the simplest packages. Shanice watched, overwhelmed, as they cut to interviews with audience members from the previous night. "I've never seen anything like it," one woman said, dabbing at her eyes. You could feel the healing in that room. It wasn't just a concert. It was a testimony. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Cameron. "Have you seen the news?" he asked when she answered. "I'm watching it now," she replied, still stunned. "Cameron, what's happening?" "The Foundation's phones are ringing off the hook," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Donations are pouring in. Major corporations want to partner with us. But that's not even the best part. People are calling asking how they can help, how they can volunteer. This is bigger than money, Shanice. This is about real change." Throughout the morning, the story spread. National morning shows picked it up, sharing the footage coast to coast. Social media exploded with clips and comments. By noon, Shanice had received calls from 3 different talk shows and half a dozen churches, all wanting to book her for appearances. She declined them all, politely but firmly. "But why?" Tasha demanded when they met for lunch at the center. "You could be famous again. For real this time." Shanice smiled, touching the teen's hand. "Because this isn't about being famous. It's about being faithful. My place is here, where God brought me to heal." Mother Eloise, overhearing, nodded approvingly. "And that's exactly why God's blessing it," she said, joining them at the table. "Because you understood the lesson." That afternoon, Cameron called, an impromptu meeting in the center's main hall. Staff members, volunteers, and regular visitors gathered, curious about what he had to say. "Last night showed us something powerful," he began, standing at the front of the room. "It showed us that when we're real with each other, when we're vulnerable and honest about our struggles, that's when true healing begins." He looked at Shanice, then continued. "Which is why I'm announcing a new program. We're calling it the Grace and Grit Choir." A murmur of interest rippled through the room. "This won't be just any choir," Cameron explained. "It will be specifically for women who are recovering from abuse, trauma, and homelessness. A place where they can find their voice again, literally and figuratively." Shanice felt tears welling up as he went on. "Mother Eloise has agreed to serve as spiritual director," he announced, gesturing to the older woman, who beamed. "And Tasha will be our youth ambassador, helping us reach younger women who need this program." Tasha's eyes went wide. "For real?" "For real?" Cameron confirmed with a smile. "And of course," he added, turning to Shanice, "we'll need a director who understands firsthand what it means to rise from ashes. Someone who can show others the way, because she's walked it herself." The room burst into applause as Shanice covered her mouth, overcome with emotion. This was it, the purpose she'd been searching for, the reason for all the pain she'd endured. Over the next few days, as the year drew to a close, they worked tirelessly to get the program ready for launch. Women began signing up, some hesitant, others eager, all carrying their own stories of struggle and survival. On New Year's Eve morning, they held their first rehearsal. The room was full, fuller than anyone had expected. Women of all ages, backgrounds, and circumstances stood together, some looking nervous, others looking hopeful. Shanice stood before them, her heart full. Gone was the woman who had hidden behind a hoodie just months ago. In her place stood someone new, someone stronger, yet gentler. Someone who had learned that her scars were not marks of shame, but badges of survival. "Welcome," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Some of you might be wondering why you're here. Maybe you think you can't sing well enough. Maybe you're afraid to let anyone hear your voice. Maybe you're just here because someone made you come." A few nervous laughs rippled through the group. "But here's what I want you to know," Shanice continued. "We don't sing because we're perfect. We sing because we're healing. Every note, every word, every harmony is part of that healing, and we're going to do it together." From the back of the room, Cameron watched, his eyes glistening. Mother Eloise stood beside him, nodding in satisfaction. Tasha, sitting cross-legged on a chair near the piano, couldn't stop grinning. As Shanice led them in their first warm-up, something magical happened. Voices that had been silenced by pain began to rise. Women who had been told they were worthless began to shine. And in the simple act of singing together, healing began to flow. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long rays across the floor. Outside, Atlanta was preparing for its New Year's celebrations. But inside this room, something more profound was taking place. The birth of new hope, the restoration of broken spirits, the miracle of grace in action. As they practiced their first song, a simple hymn about new beginnings, the harmonies grew stronger, more confident. Shanice looked around the room, seeing in each face a reflection of her own journey. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. 6 weeks after the launch of Grace and Grit Choir, the new Light Community Center hummed with an energy that felt almost magical. Shanice Rivers walked through the freshly painted hallways, her footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Every corner held evidence of transformation, not just of the building, but of the lives within it. Colorful posters lined the walls, advertising upcoming performances and workshops. "Find your voice," read one, decorated with musical notes. "Strength in harmony," proclaimed another, showing clasped hands forming a heart. The sound of laughter drifted from the practice rooms, punctuated by piano chords and vocal warm-ups. Shanice paused near the reception desk where she'd first started working, remembering that grey morning when she'd arrived with her hood pulled tight, begging not to be seen. Now she wore her short curls proudly, each coil a testament to her journey. "Miss Rivers," called out 12-year-old Destiny, one of their newest choir members. "Can you help me with my solo for next week?" "Of course, sweetheart," Shanice replied, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. Just months ago, Destiny had barely spoken above a whisper. Now she was volunteering for solos. Mother Eloise appeared in the doorway of her office, her face glowing with satisfaction. "Child, you've got visitors waiting in the garden room," she said with a knowing smile. Curious, Shanice made her way down the sunlit corridor. The garden room was their newest addition, a peaceful space with large windows overlooking the center's small but flourishing community garden. As she approached, she saw Cameron Holt standing there, hands behind his back. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said warmly. His usual business attire had been replaced by jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his community center uniform, as the staff teasingly called it. "Some of us actually work around here," Shanice teased back, noting how naturally their friendship had evolved. The awkwardness of their early interactions had melted into comfortable camaraderie. Cameron's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Well, this working person might want to close her eyes for a minute." Shanice raised an eyebrow but complied. She heard movement, then Cameron's voice saying, "Okay, open them." In his hands was a beautiful mirror, its frame crafted from intricate golden swirls that caught the afternoon light. It wasn't large or ostentatious, just perfect for a daily reminder of truth. "For the woman who taught me to see," Cameron said softly, his voice carrying a weight of meaning that made Shanice's heart skip. She took the mirror carefully, running her fingers along the delicate frame. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Look in it," he encouraged. Shanice raised the mirror, and for the first time in many months she really looked at herself. Her reflection showed clear eyes that had cried but learned to laugh again, skin that glowed with health and purpose, and those short curls that had become her signature. She laughed, a full, joyous sound that echoed through the room. "You know," she said, "I used to think beauty meant hiding all the broken parts. Now I know it means letting them shine anyway." Cameron nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's exactly what makes this place work." He agreed. "No one has to pretend here." Their moment was interrupted by Tasha poking her head in. "Miss Shanice, the girls are ready for the outdoor concert setup." The evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as volunteers set up chairs on the center's back lawn. String lights twinkled in the trees, creating a magical atmosphere. Women from the Grace and Grit choir helped arrange music stands and microphones, their chatter and laughter filling the air. Shanice watched the scene with pride. These women, survivors all, had become a family. They supported each other through bad days, celebrated victories both small and large, and sang with voices that grew stronger every week. As people began filling the chairs, community members, families, even a few local news crews, Shanice felt a small tug on her sleeve. She looked down to see Maria, a 7-year-old whose mother had recently joined the choir. "Miss Shanice," Maria asked, her eyes serious, "will you ever grow your hair long again?" The question caught Shanice off guard, but she knelt down to the child's level, seeing genuine curiosity in those innocent eyes. She thought carefully about her answer, knowing it mattered. "Maybe someday," she replied with a gentle smile. "But for now I'm keeping it short. It reminds me that healing doesn't have to hide." Maria nodded solemnly, reaching up to touch her own long braids. "I like it short," she declared. "It makes you look brave." As the little girl skipped away, Shanice felt tears prick her eyes. From somewhere behind her, she heard Mother Eloise say, "Lord, look at your handiwork." The choir assembled as the last rays of sunlight painted Atlanta's skyline in gold. Shanice took her place at the front, looking out at the faces of her singers, women who had survived domestic violence, homelessness, addiction, and loss. Women who now stood tall, their voices ready to tell, their stories through song. She raised her hands and the music began, soft at first, then building. Beauty for Ashes filled the evening air, but this time it wasn't just Shanice's voice telling the story. It was a chorus of survivors, each adding their own harmony to the testament of healing. The audience sat transfixed as the voices rose into the darkening sky. Cameron stood at the back, his face reflecting the same joy that filled every heart present. Tasha, now confident in her role as youth ambassador, swayed with the music, her eyes closed in peaceful appreciation. As the final notes faded into the gentle Georgia evening, Shanice looked around at her choir, her family. The little garden lights twinkled like stars come down to earth, illuminating faces that shone with pride and purpose. In that moment, she understood that true healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about transforming it into something beautiful. The applause that followed wasn't just for the music. It was for every woman who had found her voice again, for every tear that had watered the garden of new beginnings, for every broken piece that had been lovingly gathered and reformed into something stronger. As the choir took their final bow, the warm Atlanta night wrapped around them like a blessing, and the air hummed with the sweet resonance of hope, faith, and love renewed. Warm spring sunlight filtered through the open windows of the new Light Community Center, carrying with it the sweet scent of blooming dogwoods and the promise of new beginnings. The rehearsal room buzzed with life as gospel harmonies floated into the Atlanta streets, a testament to how far they'd all come since that cold December night. Shanice Rivers stood by the window, her fingers absently touching the soft waves that had grown from her once shorn head. She kept them trimmed short, not out of shame anymore, but as a reminder of her journey. The sound of women's voices blending in perfect harmony made her heart swell with gratitude. "Miss Shanice," called out one of the newer choir members, "the city folks are here." The room quickly filled with people as the Atlanta City Council representative arrived with her entourage and local media. Cameras clicked and whirred as Shanice was presented with a gleaming crystal award inscribed with "Award for Community Impact, in recognition of outstanding service to Atlanta's women." Under the bright lights, Shanice took the podium, her hands steady now, where they once would have trembled. "This isn't about me," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is about every woman who thought her story was over, every sister who believed she'd sung her last song, every daughter of God who forgot her own worth." She paused, touching her short waves. "This is about how grace finds us in our darkest moments and shows us the way home." From the back of the room, Cameron Holt watched with quiet pride. His eyes never left Shanice as she spoke, remembering that rainy morning when she'd first walked into the center, too afraid to even look in a mirror. This woman before him now, radiant with purpose, hadn't needed saving. She'd needed someone to believe in her, while she remembered how to believe in herself. As the crowd began to thin, their footsteps echoing through the polished halls, Shanice and Cameron found themselves walking side by side through the empty community center. Afternoon light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. "The board meeting went well," Cameron said softly. "They've approved funding for 5 more centers like New Light across the country." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "We want you to lead the National Outreach Program. Your story, your vision, it could help thousands of women find their voice again." Shanice's breath caught in her throat. The magnitude of the opportunity settled over her like a warm blanket. For a moment she was quiet, letting the weight of the decision rest in her heart. Then a smile spread across her face, the kind that started in her eyes and worked its way down. "I guess God's not done with me yet." That evening, as the sun began its descent over Atlanta's skyline, Shanice made her way to the small church where her healing had truly begun. The old wooden doors creaked familiar welcome as she stepped inside. Mother Eloise sat near the altar, her aged hands folded in prayer, looking as permanent as the sturdy pews around her. "You kept the faith, baby," Mother Eloise whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Shanice knelt beside her mentor, tears gathering in her eyes but not falling. Without words, she began to hum "Beauty for Ashes," the song that had become her testimony. One by one, other voices joined in, choir members who had followed her to this sacred space. The harmony grew, filling every corner of the old church with hope and healing. Through the stained glass windows, the setting sun cast patterns of gold and amber across the wooden floor. Shanice moved to stand by the church door, catching her reflection in the glass. The woman who looked back at her wasn't hiding anymore. Her face showed no trace of shame, only peace. Her short waves framed features that had grown strong with purpose, eyes that had learned to see beauty in broken places. She touched the glass gently, remembering the woman she'd been, terrified, shorn, believing herself worthless. Now she stood transformed, not despite her scars, but because of them. Whole, complete, ready for whatever God had planned next. The golden light of sunset embraced the city beyond the church windows, painting Atlanta's skyline in hues of promise. Inside, the voices of the choir continued to rise, a symphony of healing that echoed far beyond these walls. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.